Hey dear viewer, this is Almighty Z, and man is Nosferatu good.
Yeah! Fuck yeah!
Filmmaker and writer Robert Eggers is behind this remake and should be highly commended for this. In an age where most horror movies are set in the present and rely on jump scares, it's incredibly refreshing to see something set in the mid-19th century that relies on its grim atmosphere, well-developed tension, and a captivating antagonist to create fear. And while the story isn't perfect, Eggers does a tremendous job of how this story is told. Like how they build up the reveal of our antagonist, Count Orlok. Taking a page out of other horror movies like Jaws, we don't see his full appearance until we've gained an understanding of what he is capable of, making the reveal more terrifying. The cinematography is beautiful and creates elegant and haunting environments, especially around Orlok's castle. The dialogue is period accurate and makes you feel like the events transpiring could have potentially happened in 19th century Germany. The way certain scenes are edited involving Orlok's abilities are intended to disturb you, and man do they work. And while every performance is good, two are outstanding. Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok, and Lily Rose Depp as Ellen. This iteration of Orlok really emphasizes how ancient and demonic he is. And Skarsgård portrays this brilliantly with his slow methodical movements and a voice that sounds a millennia old. He even learned how to lower his voice a whole octave to be convincing in this role.
You will remain and well rest yourself.
As for Depp, she portrays a character that exhibits two polarizing sides. There's her normal personality, a caring and devoted wife that tries to be positive, yet gets caught up in dark visions and nightmares, implying there's a darker side than what she wants to acknowledge. And when she feels the influence of Orlok, she twists and convulses her body like a puppet pulled by a maleficent master. I've never seen a performance from the daughter of Johnny Depp, but she knocks it out of the park with the range she conveys.
That sounds awesome!
Now, full disclosure, as of this video, I haven't seen the original Nosferatu, so I apologize if my analysis isn't accurate. But I want to give you my thoughts on this remake, and I'll absolutely watch the original when I can. So let's dig into this story, shall we?
You have been warned.
In 1838 Germany, a real estate agent named Thomas takes a job to take a long journey to ensure a wealthy count is sold a decaying home in his town. But his newlywed wife, Ellen, tries to dissuade him from going. She fears if he leaves, nightmares of her falling in love with death will come to fruition. But Thomas promises it will be worth it, as the money will be able to buy a good home for them, and leaves with Ellen staying with friends, the Hardings. The closer Thomas gets to Count Orlok, the more foreboding events seem to happen, like a Thursday in Memphis. The local village of gypsies are terrified to learn of his destination. Or later that night, they stab a corpse that vomits blood. Still determined, Thomas ventures on. More ominous signs emerge, like a driverless carriage that takes him to the castle. The building is barely lit and dilapidated, and he's unable to get a good look at Count Orlok himself. He blends into the shadows, and despite his old age, seems to move swiftly wherever he desires. Thomas feels anxious during the entire interaction, and when he accidentally cuts his finger, Orlok becomes bloodthirsty, and suddenly Thomas loses consciousness. This entire sequence does a great job of building up our antagonist. Each event increases the dread you feel the closer Thomas gets to Orlok. You know he's entering danger, yet you can't help him. Thomas remains in this state for a few days, and while the papers are signed, Orlok keeps a locket of Ellen from Thomas, and is fixated with her image. After having enough, Thomas finds where Orlok sleeps, in a casket during the day surrounded by rats.
Oh hell no!
He grabs a pickaxe and tries to stab Orlok, but he wakes up and forcefully bites Thomas, all the while forcing horrific images of Ellen into Thomas's mind. I really like how this Orlok looks like an ancient Romanian lord with a dash of supernatural. His clothing and mustache look the part, yet his skin is an unnatural color. Meanwhile, Ellen is getting night terrors, and her local Dr. Cjbeards nor her friends can't seem to stop them. Cjbeards consults his mentor, von Franz, who is also knowledgeable about the occult. And after von Franz witnesses a night terror that looks more like a demonic possession, he concludes that Ellen is partially controlled by a Nosferatu. And how is this possible? Well, when Ellen was younger, she was alone and confused. So she reached out to any spirit who could help her, and Orlok violently answered. And after unwittingly committing to Orlok, an essence of him is left in Ellen, giving her nightmares along with physical contortions that are eerily sexual against her will. And unbeknownst to everyone, Orlok is moving to their town because Thomas's boss, Herr Nock, is actually a crazed worshipper of Orlok. And a Nosferatu is sailing to their town right now to wreak havoc and reclaim the woman who is his.
Everybody got that?
Now here is where I have some criticisms of the story. First, Orlok is somehow able to load himself and his coffin into a container. then send it down through the mountains to a shore that's assumably far away, and have the proper documentation be loaded on a cargo ship. While we are shown Orlok has telepathic powers of control like over the horses for his carriage, or over people to worship like Nock, there's no signs of any physical help to get him to this point. I know you're keeping how shadowy and otherworldly Orlok is, but this transition just kinda happens and we should be shown more details of how he got to the ship. Second, Orlok's castle is hundreds if not at least 1,000 miles away from the town where Ellen grew up. Yet he somehow detects Ellen's vulnerability and can project his essence that far. Is there any limit at all to how far he can project himself? And if he desires beautiful but susceptible women, there aren't any others he can control within his radius of power? Don't get me wrong, I'm sure many men dead and alive want to get with Lily Rose Depp, but you've got all of Europe to prey on. And there isn't another desirable woman that would be closer for you to take as your own?
My standards are just too high, you know? I feel like nobody's good enough for me.
Well, I guess so. Anyway, Thomas was able to escape Orlok's castle by jumping into a nearby river and luckily washing on a bank near some nuns who heal him. Even though he's not fully healed, he rushes back home to warn the town. Meanwhile, during Orlok's voyage, he preys on each crew member, eventually killing all of them in some pretty good horror scenes. Once he lands, Nock takes him to his new home and the town becomes infested with rats. Thomas drifts back into town, but is exhausted and scarred from his interaction with Orlok. Ellen and the Hardings try to nurse him back to health and get some sleep. But that night, Orlok appears to Ellen. He says Thomas signed a contract giving her away for a sack of gold, but she doesn't believe it. Orlok admits he can't love, but their fates are intertwined with her earlier commitment. And when Ellen still refuses, Orlok says if she doesn't submit to him in 3 nights, he will kill everyone she cares about, with Thomas being the last on the 3rd night. And here is something else I'm impressed with in this iteration of a vampire. When active at night, he's able to appear when he wants and in the shadows. It adds to the ominous abilities that Orlok has. Turning into a bat to travel has been done to death. And while other vampire iterations can have a devilish charisma to entice its victims, Orlok uses brute telepathic force, including imposing Ellen to have sexual feelings towards him. And for Orlok, it's not about
fuck her right in the pussy!
Just raw power and dominance over something he wants, making his motivation even more sinister. Moving on, much of the town is infected with the plague, and Cjbeards and von Franz try to find Nosferatu's location. They find out about Nock's servitude and Orlok's new residence in the decrepit estate he bought, but Orlok keeps his word and murders all but the father of the Harding family, devastating the father and Ellen. Von Franz researches how to destroy Nosferatu, but there are conflicting methods on how to destroy it, except for one. The coffin must be burned, and a fair maiden offering up herself for the beast until sunrise on the next day. Von Franz leads a small party to the estate that night, where they find Orlok's coffin, and Thomas drives a stake through the heart of Nock. Thomas realizes why Ellen didn't come and runs back as the place burns. Meanwhile, Ellen is dressed like a bride and waits for Orlok's eventual arrival. When he does, she gives himself over to him, and he devours her flesh. But the sun comes up, Orlok realizes the ruse, and withers away, along with Ellen. Now, I've seen criticism for her decision because of how von Franz believed this was the only way to kill Orlok, and it's morally bad that a girl near suicide for most of the film was encouraged to sacrifice herself. But I disagree with both counts. First, we're shown Thomas trying to kill Orlok with a stake through the heart, and he stops him, so that method won't work. And given how no one, including von Franz, has dealt with a Nosferatu before, it is logical to conclude the information most commonly found in folklore research is likely the best solution. It isn't perfect, but time isn't exactly on their side, and you need to act with what they've been given. And while von Franz did encourage Ellen to secretly go through with this plan, Ellen did agree to this in a right state of mind. This bloodshed began with her devoting herself to Orlok when she was younger. A mistake, while due to naivety, was still a bad mistake. She agreed with von Franz that his idea would be the only way to kill Orlok, and if they tried another way and it failed, Orlok would come for Thomas next. And despite some very intense arguments the two had over their mistakes with Orlok, they loved each other dearly. Ellen couldn't bear the idea of losing the man she loved that helped end her spells of darkness. So to sacrifice herself to end the evil creature is noble in several aspects. While it isn't fair how she got in the situation, she redeemed herself and showed strength and courage in the face of evil. It's just tragic she couldn't enjoy a long, happy marriage with the man she loved. This movie is an excellent showing of gothic horror in the modern world. If you've made it this far and are still uncertain if you should watch this movie, give it a go. Even if you aren't a fan of horror movies, try it. it won't bite. Anywho, thank you all for watching. Expect more videos from me, Almighty Z, discussing more media from A to Z. So long.